By the second day, the dirt beneath the shed looked like something had clawed its way out, or in. Officer Neil Carter knew his partner, Boomer, wasn't the type to act out for attention, but the way the retriever growled when anyone got near the hole, that was new, wrong. And when Neil finally got down on his knees and cleared the last layer of earth himself, the glint of something metal made his blood run cold. It wasn't a tool. It wasn't old trash. It was the barrel of a small, rusted gun. The storm rolled in early. Clouds stacked heavy and low above Sycamore Hollow, turning the afternoon to shadow. The air hung thick with the scent of damp pine and churned-up soil. Officer Neil Carter parked his cruiser along the gravel drive of 118 Marigold Lane, right beside the garden where Boomer sat stone still, staring at the shed like it had whispered his name. The retriever's chest rose and fell fast. His nails were caked in mud clear up to the joint, and the hole beneath the warped planks had widened since Neil last checked. Again, Boomer growled, not barking, not warning, something lower, like a rumble from the earth itself. Neil crouched beside him. "What the hell, boy? You're not like this." Boomer didn't look away. His body was tense, tail still. He had the focus of a dog that had sniffed out fentanyl in duffel bags, chased suspects through creek beds, and once pulled a 6-year-old girl from a mine shaft before the paramedics could get there. This wasn't nervous behavior. This was duty. Neil pulled his gloves on, heart thudding, and scooped a few wet clumps of dirt aside. A shard of glass poked up through the soil. Then fabric, blue, mold-worn denim. He paused. It wasn't just the shape of the fabric. It was how it was folded. Flat. Hidden deliberately. Someone had buried something they didn't want found. Then he saw the gun. He stopped breathing for a second. Rusted. Small caliber. A .22, maybe. Not fresh, but not decades old either. He reached carefully into the dirt with both hands and pulled out the rest of the item attached to it. A canvas backpack. Kid size. The zipper was broken, jammed halfway open. Inside was a half-rotted notebook, plastic lunchbox with faded cartoons, and a Polaroid sealed in a sandwich bag. A boy, maybe 10, brown bowl cut, toothy smile, holding up a frog like a prize. In the background, Neil froze. That wasn't just any backyard. That was his backyard. The wind picked up, slamming the shed door shut behind him. Boomer whined low. Neil stood slowly, breath fogging in the sudden chill. He opened his radio. "Dispatch, this is Carter. I need Detective Mallory at my location. Now, tell her to bring gloves." Detective Erin Mallory didn't like being called to Marigold Lane. It was too close to where she grew up. She hadn't driven past her old house in nearly 6 years. Not since her brother, Casey, overdosed on fentanyl in their mom's trailer. Not since she buried the idea of ever coming home again. When the call came in from Carter, she almost ignored it, but his voice wasn't right. And when Neil Carter didn't sound right, you listened. She parked just as thunder rolled in behind the trees. Neil was by the shed, Boomer pacing restlessly beside him. He handed her the bag without a word. She opened it carefully. Her eyes caught the Polaroid first, then the torn notebook with faded bubble letters spelling out property of Wesley M. She stiffened. "Wesley Mathers?" she asked. Neil nodded. "That's impossible. He was just some missing persons case from, 2005? Kid who vanished after school one day. Never found," Neil said, "and now he's under your shed." Erin swallowed. "Hard. This isn't my shed." It was, "You lived here with your mom until 2004, year before the boy went missing." She turned slowly toward the house. The porch was newer, the shutters repainted, but the bones were the same. Her bones were in there too, in a way. And somewhere deep, so was something else. Neil watched her carefully. "You ever know a Wesley?" Erin shook her head. "No, but my mom might have. She babysat a lot of kids. I was out of the house most nights by then." "Still," Neil said, squinting toward the trees, "doesn't it bother you? Something about this just feels off." Erin zipped the bag shut. "Everything about this town feels off." They met with the current homeowner the next morning. Donna Heller, mid-40s, soft-spoken, lived alone. Bought the property after Erin's mother passed. Said she didn't touch the shed much, just used it for tools. Didn't even know there was a hole under it. Boomer stayed locked in the patch of dirt even as they walked her to the cruiser. I don't know anything about a kid, Donna insisted, voice brittle. Never heard that name before. I swear. Erin studied her hands. No tremble, no tics, but her eyes lingered too long on Boomer. People lied to human officers all the time. They forgot dogs remembered scent. Neil leaned in once the woman was out of earshot. You believe her? I don't know yet, Erin said, but I believe Boomer. They ran the prints from the lunchbox. Smudged, water damaged. But one clean index print pulled a match from the 2004 school database. Wesley Mathers, age 9, last seen walking home from Maple Creek Elementary. No suspects, no body, just a cold case that faded into local myth. Neil sat on his porch late that night, sipping beer from a sweating bottle, listening to the wind work its way through the hollows. He remembered the posters stapled to telephone poles. Wesley's grin had stared out from tree trunks and gas pumps for months. Then nothing. A decade later, even the whispers stopped. Boomer sat beside him, eyes on the tree lean. You're not done, are you? Neil muttered. Boomer's ears twitched. Neil rose, grabbed a flashlight, and followed the dog across the field and into the woods. The rain had started up again, light at first, then steady. It was an hour before Boomer stopped. They stood before a tree marked with deep gouges. Not scratches. Carvings. Neil knelt and shone his light over the bark. Wes M., stay away. I hear him. And lower, almost at the roots, carved sloppily. He made me dig. Neil's stomach turned. Erin sat in her apartment with the photo spread out under a lamp. She recognized something in the background now, an old tire swing. Her dad had strung it up when she was maybe 9. He'd taken it down after. She didn't like remembering after. She looked up the case file again. Last known location, Maple Creek Trailhead. The same trail that ran behind their property. She remembered one night, late summer. She was home alone. Mom at her second job. Erin in the basement, watching TV with the volume way up. There was a sound upstairs. Not footsteps. Something dragging. She'd told herself it was a dog. But they didn't have a dog back then. Her blood ran cold. She closed her laptop and reached for her keys. Back at Marigold Lane, Neil had taken a shovel to the space behind the shed. Boomer had started digging again, slower, like he was waiting for permission. 6 inches down, Neil hit plastic. A Tupperware container, sealed with electrical tape. Inside, teeth, human, small. Neil stepped back. Jesus. He radioed for backup. Again. Boomer stayed still this time, as if waiting for something else. Across town, Erin parked outside the old church and walked to the back lot where the kids used to cut through to get home. She found the trailhead, just like she remembered. Just past the creek, a rusted sign pointed toward a disused ranger post. She followed Boomer's scent path from earlier in the day, looping through brambles, old stone markers, and then, there, a metal hatch. Locked, but not old. She jimmied it open. The stairs led down into blackness. She called Neil. I think I found where he took them. The hatch groaned as Erin forced it open with a pry bar she kept in her trunk since her days on narcotics detail. The metal rasped loud in the wet silence of the woods, like something protesting its own resurrection. The stairs inside were narrow and slick, lined with moss and wet leaves. Her flashlight flicked weakly over rusted handrails and chipped concrete. The air that rose to meet her was stale. Still, too still. She hesitated, then started down, one step at a time, her hand tight on the grip of her service weapon. 20 feet below, the stairs ended at a dirt floor. A single bulb hung overhead, unlit, but someone had been here recently. The footprints in the mud weren't hers. Erin's pulse climbed as she moved forward into the dark, the beam of her flashlight swinging across walls lined with old shells and jars. Then she saw it, the far wall, etched, scratched, scraped again and again. I didn't want to. I said no. He took my teeth. Her breath caught. One message, carved deep and trembling, stared back at her. She knows. Behind her, a sharp creak echoed. Aaron spun around, but the hatch had slammed shut. Neil's phone buzzed hard against his thigh. He answered before the second ring. "Where are you?" Aaron said, her voice tight. "It's not a bunker, it's a basement. But it's not on any records. It's behind the trailhead near the creek." "You went in alone?" There wasn't time. Boomer, beside Neil, let out a growl, low and urgent. He turned, saw the dog pacing along the edge of the garden again, nose down. "I found something else, too," Aaron said. "There's carvings, messages. From a kid, maybe more than one. I think this place was used to keep them." A static burst cut her off. Neil looked at his signal. 1 bar. Fading. He grabbed his radio and keys. "Boomer, truck. Now." The dog bolted toward the passenger's side without hesitation. Aaron pressed her shoulder to the hatch. It didn't budge. "Damn it." She paced once, twice, flashlight catching a thin metal door at the far end of the room. She hadn't noticed it before. Too flush with the wall. There was no handle, only a hook latch at the top. She reached up, unlatched it. The door creaked open into a side chamber barely larger than a closet. On the floor was a moldy sleeping bag, stained sheets, and piles of what looked like old comic books. One had a child's name scrawled on the cover in Sharpie. Wesley M. Her chest tightened. Behind her, something moved. She turned too late. A figure, hooded, gloved, surged forward from the shadows and shoved her hard into the wall. Her head hit concrete. Lights exploded behind her eyes. The flashlight rolled away. Aaron scrambled for her weapon, but a boot pinned her wrist. "I buried this," the voice hissed. "Mail. Deep. Close. You should have let it rot." The pressure on her wrist increased. "I remember you," he said. "From the house. From the window." Aaron's blood turned ice. "You're her daughter." Neil skidded to a stop at the trailhead minutes later. Rain sheeted across the hood of the truck. Boomer lunged out before the door opened fully, nose to the ground, leading straight to the trees. Neil grabbed his flashlight, weapon, and bolt cutters. Boomer was already 50 feet ahead, tail rigid, barking once sharp, urgent. Then again, Neil followed, soaked through in seconds. They reached the hatch. Locked. He jammed the bolt cutters in, snapped the rusted chain. The hatch creaked, heavy with mud and time, but opened. Boomer dove down the steps first. Neil followed, gun drawn. The impact of the boot crushed her fingers. Aaron screamed, pain white-hot, and twisted hard enough to send the figure off balance. She kicked upward, connected with his knee. He stumbled. She rolled, crawled, found her gun. Too late. He grabbed it. But Boomer exploded into the room at that moment, barreling into the man with a snarl that sounded nothing like the gentle retriever she knew. The gun clattered away. Neil appeared seconds later, gun drawn, voice booming. "Hands up. Now!" The man didn't move, not even when Boomer sank his teeth into his forearm. Neil rushed forward, zip ties out, wrestling the attacker to the ground. Aaron stayed kneeling, breath ragged, hand cradled against her chest. Blood oozed from her broken fingers. The man was older than she'd expected, mid-50s, graying beard, pale skin. "I remember you," Aaron whispered again. And now, face to face, she did. He was a handyman, from when she was 14. Her mom called him Clyde. He'd fixed their porch, been around for weeks. She remembered not liking how he looked at her, remembered telling her mom, who'd shrugged it off. "You always overreact," her mom had said, but Aaron hadn't been wrong. At the station, Clyde gave his statement calmly. Flatly, said the boy had followed him from the school. Said he hadn't meant to do anything, not at first. "I just wanted quiet," he said. He wouldn't stop talking. He claimed the boy fell, hit his head. He panicked, hid the body, came back years later to move it. But the gun, the carved messages, the second set of teeth, those, he said, weren't his doing. Neil stared through the glass as Clyde leaned back in the interrogation chair and smiled. "Some things you bury stay buried," he muttered. "Others crawl back up." 2 nights later, Neil found Erin on the porch of the old house. She had a cast on her hand and a half-empty beer bottle at her side. She looked up as he joined her. "There's more," she said softly. Neil raised an eyebrow. Wesley wasn't alone. There was another kid. He said nothing. "I think," she swallowed, "I think it was me." Neil froze. "I used to have dreams," she continued, "of being in the dirt, of someone whispering. I thought they were just memories of fear. But now I think I saw something, heard something." She reached into her coat and pulled out a Polaroid, the same one they'd found under the shed. "I'm not just in the background," she said. "Look, the edge of the photo." He leaned in. There was her face, in the window, watching, frozen, a child's eyes wide with something like dread. "I watched it happen," she whispered. Boomer lay beside the porch, head on his paws. When Erin reached down to stroke him, his tail wagged once. "Without him," she said, "we'd still be asleep." Neil nodded. Dogs know what people forget. She nodded, then added, voice quiet, "I'm going to find the rest of the story, whether people want it or not." Neil didn't argue. The wind stirred the trees again. Boomer lifted his head, and somewhere beneath them, deep in the roots of the town, something long buried shifted once more. The next morning, Erin walked the perimeter of the old house. The backyard was quiet, dew silvering the grass. The shed still stood like a stubborn tooth. Boomer paced near the hole he dug, still sniffing, still unsettled. But it wasn't the shed that pulled her now. It was the earth behind it, the stretch of trees between her mother's old property and the creek where the trailhead curved. Erin knelt with the roots of the biggest sycamore split open, forming a shallow basin. There were new scratches in the bark. I saw her, etched like a whisper, not deep, not old, fresh enough to weep sap. Boomer let out a low whine. "You didn't stop because you knew it wasn't over," Erin murmured. Behind her, Neil emerged from the trees. He brought coffee, black and burnt. "You were right," he said without ceremony. "That guy Clyde? He wasn't working alone." Erin turned. "Who?" "He's not saying, but we pulled fragments from a burner phone buried with a container. Trace one number to someone you know." Erin braced herself. Neil handed her the printout. It was a name she hadn't heard in years. Marjorie Collins. Her mother. Marjorie had been dead for over a decade. Liver failure. No service. No headstone. Just a cardboard box of ashes Erin left with the funeral home. The thought of her mother's phone number showing up in connection with the boy's burial twisted something in her gut. Neil watched her carefully. "Could be a dead end," he said. "Could be a reused number. Could be nothing." Erin shook her head. "No, it's something." She walked back into the house. The floor still creaked in the same places. The attic stairs still groaned like a throat clearing in warning. And in her old bedroom, walls still faintly blue under a layer of beige. The corner closet was jammed shut. She forced it open. Inside were boxes, one labeled keepsakes. She opened it and found her mother's old notebooks, grocery list, handwritten recipes, clipped coupons. Nothing until the bottom. Then a letter, unsent, to whom it may concern. "If anything happens to me, ask Erin about the woods." She stopped breathing. The letter wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. On the back was a date, July 13th, 2004, the day before Wesley Mathers disappeared. Back at the precinct, Erin laid out everything on the table. The letter, the photo, the bag of items. Neil brought out the report from Clyde's last job before his arrest. He'd been fixing up a cabin out by Hollowbrook, 5 miles out of town. Private property. Belonged to a name they didn't recognize. Neil raised an eyebrow. "We go check it out?" Erin didn't answer. She just grabbed her coat and the leash. Boomer barked once, sharp and ready. The road to Hollowbrook was little more than gravel dust and tire ruts. Pines lined the shoulder, so thick it felt like driving into a throat that would never open again. They parked by the gate. No signage, no lights. The house beyond was small, 2 stories, Run down but not abandoned. Curtains moved when the breeze didn't. Neil drew his weapon. Aaron followed. Boomer tensed, nose twitching. They moved up the porch together. Knocked once. Silence. Then creaking footsteps upstairs. Neil moved left. Aaron right. Boomer stayed rooted at the base of the stairs. Hackles raised. Aaron pointed up. Neil nodded. She led the way. At the top was a narrow hallway. 3 doors. One open. Empty. Second, locked. The third was ajar. Inside, the air was sour. Old. Like ammonia and rot. She stepped in. A mattress on the floor. Chains on the baseboards. Crude drawings taped to the wall. Children, with X's for eyes. A closet door stood closed. She reached for it. Boomer growled behind her. Neil whispered, "Aaron, wait." She opened it. Inside was a single shoe, child-sized, mud still crusted on the sole. She turned it over. The name written in faded marker. Wes M. They didn't find anyone in the house. Whoever had been there was gone, but not long gone. The stove was still warm. Dishes in the sink. A bed slept in the night before. Erin stood on the porch with a shoe in her hand, her casted fingers trembling. "I think my mom knew," she said softly. Neil glanced over. "About Clyde? Or someone else?" Erin stared out at the woods. She used to say there were things in this town that didn't want sunlight. She wasn't poetic, you know? She was blunt. She meant people. She turned to him. "She didn't warn me. Not when I said I was scared. Not when I told her someone was watching. She told me to go to sleep." Neil said nothing. "She didn't just ignore it," Erin said. "She let it happen." That night, Erin sat in her apartment, alone with the Polaroid again. She looked closer, this time with a magnifying glass. In the reflection of the window where her child self stared back, a second figure stood behind her, blurred, but unmistakable. Tall, male, older, and someone with her mother's haircut, standing just behind him. Her stomach dropped. She'd never noticed. Or maybe she hadn't wanted to. They got the warrant the next day to exhume what was left behind the shed. They found 2 bodies. One matched Wesley. The other was older. Estimated age, 16. Female. Hair still caught in the collar of the hoodie she wore. Faded patch stitched to the chest. Erin collapsed to the ground. She remembered the girl from the trail, the one who went missing before Wesley. She remembered the whispers. "Emily Carter," Neil said softly. "My cousin." He stared at the body like it might breathe again. Erin looked at him. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer, just stared. Boomer stood by the open grave, tail low, ears back. He'd found them all. Every time, he had dug not for answers, but for witnesses, for the ones no one listened to. Neil finally knelt beside him. "Good boy," he said, voice cracking. Boomer pressed his muzzle into Neil's chest. In the weeks that followed, Erin left the force. She moved out of her apartment and bought a cabin far upstate with more trees than neighbors. She spent her days with Boomer, long hikes through open quiet. Neil stayed. Someone had to. They kept in touch, rarely with words, more often with silence. 2 people who had both been raised by ghosts. The town didn't speak much of the discoveries, just like they hadn't back then. But the truth, now unearthed, had found breath again, and it would not be buried. Not by them. Not ever again.